Now, you'll all be aware that last Sunday there were protests in Bristol, which got pretty aggro. And the protests were against the policing bill, which grants the police sweeping powers to shut down any peaceful protest. It also, by the way, very important, particularly targets Roma, traveller and Gypsy communities. And the local police force afterwards, this is Somerset and Avon, they claimed in a statement that one officer had suffered a broken arm and another suffered broken ribs. Both have been taken to hospital. They also claimed in a statement that one of them also suffered a punctured lung. Now, clearly those are serious injuries and they were treated as such by the media. So if we look at the Sun splashed on Kill the Bill protest, cop's lung collapses as he's stamped on and another suffers broken bones. Another video published by the Sun, so I've put a video published by the Sun, which got nearly 167,000 views already, headline cop's lung collapses and another bones broken. It's the same with the broadcast media. So on Sky News, they splashed on officers suffer broken arm and ribs after Kill the Bill protests descend into violence. These protests were really widely reported across the British media. So take The Spectator. They published an article headlined, "The Bristol riots show the danger of ignoring anti-police extremism," citing the seriously injured officers in the first paragraph of that article as evidence. Now, when the Labour MP Nadia Whitten was asked on television, she said she condemned all the violence and would wait to see what actually happened. Now, she was piled on, including on Twitter, with the serious injuries such as a punctured lung frequently cited in those attacks on Nadia Whitten. One small problem with all of this, after these reports were very widely circulated, the police force quietly retracted the reports on Wednesday. No officer suffered any serious injury in those protests. Hold on a minute. Let's just think about this. Maybe you're thinking, well, maybe they just didn't know how badly injured the officers were. Maybe they had possible broken bones and a possible collapsed lung. Well, they didn't say that in the statement. I mean, I just said possible, didn't I? But they didn't say that. They said as a definite. These were definite statements, which were then reported as fact. Now, I suppose the question is what medical advice with the police force is given. I'm very interested in that, which is why I got in touch with the press department of the police force. And I would love for them to answer, but they have failed to get back to me, even though I messaged them hours ago. These are press officers. It's their job to deal with annoying people like me. I know my other colleague at the colleagues at the Guardian, having read their own coverage, they haven't got back to them either. So I would like to know on what basis did they, as definites, report very serious injuries, including an officer being stamped on so their lung collapsed and broken ribs and broken arms. Now, why does this matter? I think this is beyond unfortunate, should we just put it that way? Because there is an increasingly authoritarian atmosphere in this country, which with the government and its supporters intolerant of protest and dissent, hence legislation, which the protests were about, of course, the policing bill, which will allow the police to crack down. Essentially, if you look at the provisos into any protest judged to cause annoyance. The point of a protest is to cause annoyance to someone, i.e. those in power generally. That really is the point of protest. Now, these widely circulated claims of serious injuries, and it's worth pointing that the subsequent clarifications got nowhere near the same amplification. So you get these big headlines and videos going viral from the media, but then the police just a few days later, when people aren't talking about the protest anymore, go, oh yeah, there weren't any injuries. That was serious. That helps fuel an atmosphere of demonizing protesters and supporting the police being handed more authoritarian powers to shut down our rights and freedoms that were fought for at huge cost and huge sacrifice by our ancestors, who I would know, many of whom felt the hard smack of police batons in their faces and were demonized by the media, and indeed were demonized by media outlets and the police authorities for being violent hoodlums in their day. That's just a fact. We could go back, LGBTQ activists, trade unionists, women, the suffragettes, most notably, who lauded now as secular saints. Oh boy, they were not at the time. They were terrorists and anarchists at the time. People who fought racism, people who fought for, all our rights and freedoms, to be honest, including people really, if you go back, were massacred by the state, like at the Peterloo Massacre of 1819 in Manchester. So I think there's something of a history here, which we do need to just briefly unpick before I bring in our guest to puncture, hopefully, the pessimism of the title of this video. So back in 2008, police aggressively shut down climate camp protesters near Kings North Power Station. They claimed several resulting injuries. That turned out to be false. There were no injuries sustained in clashes with the protesters. One injury turned out to be an insect bite. Another was toothache. There were other examples. 2017, Sussex police admitted that their claims that several Crystal Palace fans had attempted to force entry to the Derby and Brighton and Hove Albion armed with knives and knuckle dusters, very alarming. I think we can all agree. Fans tooled up with knives and knuckle dusters, not good. Oh, but they were false, those reports. Didn't happen. No knives, no knuckle dusters. Widely circulated, turned out to be false. There are far worse examples. If we go back to 2009, when the homeless newspaper vendor Ian Tomlinson died at the G20 protest, which he wasn't attending, by the way. He was just on his way home at the time. It had nothing to do with it. Not that would have changed anything, by the way. Irrelevant. But the media regurgitated false briefings from the police, with the Evening Standard splashing on police belted with bricks as they helped dying man. A pack of lies. False, wrong, incorrect. Nothing correct about that. Zero. And the only reason that was proven to be false was because bear in mind, back then, camera phones and people had them, but there were just less of them. But thankfully, someone recorded what had happened. And if they hadn't, we might never know the truth. It would have just been these, eyewitnesses demonized as protesters. So how can we believe what they say? Would have, their word against the police. The police, we've got to believe everything the police say, and the media back them up. But it turned out, of course, that Tomlinson was struck by a police officer, and an inquest later found it was an unlawful killing. Going way back, well, not way back, the Battle of Orgreave. My dad was at Orgreave, not as a miner. This was during the miner strike in the mid-1980s, when the police charged at miners. Then the BBC ran a tape in a different order to make it look like the miners had attacked the police. A nonsense. A lie. The BBC have still not apologised for that, by the way, even though it's clear, just a fact. What they did is they changed the order of the tape. Clever. Very devious. And that cut through. Because at the time, now you see, one Labour MP, I'm not going to name, just a generic, obnoxious Labour MP, he said, he salivated over images of police battening protesters in Bristol. And he denied he salivated when I challenged him. But I think 3 clapping emojis over a video of police officers whacking protesters is pretty close to salivation. And then I pointed out people like him throughout history, miners, etc., LGBTQ activists have always done what he's done, salivated over state violence. And he said, no, I represent a mining community. I mean, he's not, he's the son of a film critic. Nothing wrong with that. If he's going to go all authentocrat on me, let's just stick to those facts. So he was like, the miners suffered police brutality. Those miners were demonized at the time. I know now people watch Pride, brilliant film, and think, everyone loves the miners. At the time, public opinion wasn't on their side. Sorry to airbrush some lies out of history. Often very hostile. The media whipped up total, unrelenting hostility to the miners, who were presented as violent, totalitarian thugs, the enemy within. Margaret Thatcher called them. Let's not forget that. So this was, again, another example. I mean, another final notorious example, of course, was the Hillsborough disaster of 1989, when 96 Liverpool fans died, and the sun splashed on completely disgusting lies fed to them by the police, by those scumbags in that police force, claiming fans pickpocketed victims, urinated on cops, beat up an officer giving the kiss of life. Now, those were total lies, unreconstructed lies, and the Sun is still boycotted in Merseyside as a result. What does this tell us? Well, I shouldn't really have to spell it out, but let's just do it anyway. The police forces in this country have a long record of claiming things which, to put it mildly, turn out demonstrably to be completely and utterly untrue, which the media then uncritically lap out and then lap up and then amplify and propagate, particularly when demonized others are involved. Striking miners, working class Liverpool fans in the 1980s, who was bottom of the pile at the time as you could possibly be in that pecking order of hatred, and protesters when they're involved. And that's what they do. And they use it to whip up hysteria and hatred against their targets, but also to accumulate more power. And that's what they're doing right now. And they have a policing bill which is shoveling power in their hands, as Britain continues its ever escalating trajectory towards turning into another Hungary. So we need to spell this out, because what the police force said, I'm not accusing them of lying. I'd like to know what the truth is in Bristol. I'd like to know what the basis of their reports were, and we can see how they've been used. Rant over. It's important to talk about.